Thank you. All right, welcome to the policy committee meeting. It is April 23rd. We are at 1:34. We have a full house today. So first, are there any announcements, communications?
There are none today.
Okay. And then there's minutes from the last policy committee meeting on March 19th. If there's any changes, please send them over to Brooke. Otherwise, we will be approving the minutes at the next legislative meeting. So we have, I think we can try to get this done first. We have a number of policies for second reading, and I think all of which we covered the administrative regulations, maybe not 207, but I think we covered the other administrative regulations last month. What? Right, 207 I don't think we did, but I think 234, 251, and 254. As well as, of course, the policies, 323, 423, 523. I think all of those we covered last time and we were good with, unless anyone on the committee.
My apologies, but I have some comments on some of those.
Okay, so which ones, Mark?
Let's see, for the ARs, 234, and so AR 254 looks exactly the same as the policy on the link I looked at. So I'm not sure
Which one was it?
254.
I accidentally attached the wrong file, so
I'm not
I
sure.
fixed that.
Okay, so I'm
So you may have
behind on
to
those.
review that again, I apologize.
And that's it for ARs that I had commented on.
This is which one? 234.
234.
All right, let's get these done and then we can get into the new stuff. So, all right, so the first one is, we'll look at AR 234, pregnant students.
So are we going to skip those policies that are also in that section?
All right, let's do changes to the policies, because those are second reading ones. Do you have
Yeah,
changes?
the only minor one, so I'm wondering if we could have a style guide or a checklist or something, but on several of these things, I note that there's no link from the policy to the AR, including 207,
Okay.
We are in the final.
They're in the final versions,
251,
right. And the draft versions, typically they're not because of,
I can start doing that if you would like.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that happens.
Yes.
I mean, there's notes I made, if I don't need to make those notes, I don't need to.
Right, as part of Brooke's finalizing, she puts those in the set,
Okay,
but they don't necessarily show up in the working drafts.
yeah, and things like Oxford commas and.
right, and these are all PDFs right now too, and obviously they're not.
You know, Art's, Rob's favorite parent/guardian, although I didn't catch any of those this time, I don't know if he did, but I thought we did a great job. Yeah. But I checklist of that form, because most of these are not, most of my comments are not meaningful, but I do have a meaningful comment on, or I have a question on policy 207.
All right, let's go, do you have anything on pregnant? Yeah, let's do pregnant students
You want to do
first.
234? So
Yeah, let's
on
do that
policy,
first. You've
no,
seen that before.
nothing on policy.
Yeah,
But on an AR, in the first paragraph, says mental or physical condition, but the third paragraph says physically, but does not include mental. And I'm wondering if those two things should be the same. So the first paragraph says mental or physical
you're
condition.
here.
Yeah, and
Statement
then,
of
yeah,
a
it's
licensed
highlighted, it
familiar
says
the
fit where
student.
student is physically fit, but doesn't say anything about mentally fit. And I wasn't sure if that split was intentional or accidental.
We can check that.
And then the same similar thing happens under the first sentence under absences, just below where you are on the screen, Brooke. It says health, where it says where actually I didn't highlight it, but somewhere it says health, and I wasn't sure if that meant
Sentence.
Oh yeah, whether it meant mental, physical health, or just mental health, or just physical health, just as health meant.
All right. So my thought is third paragraph, we can probably just take out the word physically, if the student is fit to do so.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we can just remove physically. It's okay. And what was the other one, Mark?
Right under absences,
Yeah.
where it says Where attendance at school would be harmful to the health of the pregnant or carrying student, so maybe we want that to be generic.
Yeah.
I wasn't
think
sure
so.
if we wanted to be explicit about, depending on what the first decision was.
Yeah,
maybe we wanted to-
I think health just makes sense.
Yeah, okay, that was it.
Okay.
That's it?
There's also a missing Oxford comment in there, but.
Go back to
Right,
it.
we're commenting on the missing Oxford commas.
That's not substantive.
It's an AR, it doesn't matter, it's an AR, we haven't voted on it yet, so that should be fine. So, okay, so we can check off 234, policy and AR for second reading, adoption, and approval. All right, and then homeless students, you said the only problem was that it looked like the AR was linked.
Homeless students is,
251? That's what I said that.
yeah, there's a minor thing in 251,
Policy.
where it says, in the last paragraph, in the new part,
The AR, right?
no, the policy.
This is in the policy,
That's
okay.
all right.
So let's go policy 251.
In the last paragraph, where it says, accompanying administrative regulations, shouldn't that be singular administrative regulation?
Yeah. And that's all.
That was it for 251, both policy and,
Sorry, there's a little lag here. That's fine. Don't worry. All right, was there anything else you had to for?
Well, that was the only note I had was that the two documents looked identical. They still look identical. Oh, I'm sorry, they don't.
And that was, we did say that was fine last time. The only thing that we were looking for was attaching an opt-out form,
Yep,
which is here.
yeah, look, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the,
Yeah.
Okay. And 323, 423, 523, those are all okay, right?
I still have the same basic concern I had last time, which is,
I'm sorry, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Krista and I were having a sidebar. As far as administrative regulation on homeless, going back to that,
Yeah.
she indicated that her department needs to be notified as far as food service requirements.
By the liaison, so that we can automatically put the student on a free meal program. I think it's an
Under
important
the
piece of it.
Well, yes, they are, definitely not policy.
Okay, so we need to add that in the AR.
I'm trying to find a place where it could just be a phrase.
Right. Consistent, responsible.
well, the responsibility.
Well, we can have director of people services is, one of the responsibilities is to notify food services.
With a liaison as
The
well.
liaison, okay.
Either.
Thank you, and I'm sorry for the interruption.
No, thank you for catching that.
And that's in the AR, correct?
You want that to be number 18?
Yeah, you can do that, thank you.
Well, I was curious whether those entire list, is that coming directly out of the basic education circular on education for homeless?
Those items that are listed.
So I'm not sure I would just add another one that's not from that source, as though we pretend that it was,
Okay.
right? It seems like it should be separate somewhere.
All right, so make it a separate paragraph.
Underneath the numbers?
Yeah, we can just add maybe a sentence under number 17, just that says, in addition, the director of pupil services.
Yeah. Okay.
Since we're on this, there are two more comments. Actually, Michelle, it's the IDEA is now IDEIA.
I was curious, I was thinking this part of it is not IDEIA though, right? This part of it.
The homeless doesn't, I mean, there's.
Well,
No,
number
it's
four,
Inventa.
Yeah, so this,
Yeah, about number 14, there's just, it cites it, that's all.
so the IDEA did not replace
Okay,
IDEA,
that's
it's a supplement.
Just
Okay.
added, yeah.
Okay.
I think.
Well, it's the latest iteration of the
You should call it individual
legislation
disability
It
improvement
changes.
education.
Okay,
Until
we
they
should
change
add
it.
on.
until they change it.
All right, so in number 14,
You should add.
It's like no child left behind
I'm
because
having
here,
issues
there's
with
a difference here.
board docs for some reason. It's,
You should do well research
Okay,
and
all right, it's
questions.
okay, where you see individuals with
I don't see that.
disabilities
There's
education.
improvement there.
Sorry.
In 14, you gotta look for
it's
it.
the
right there.
third line, the end of the
I'm
second
trying
line.
to pencil up,
it's
it's not
just, it's
behaving.
slowing.
Sorry, yeah. I don't know what the problem is
For,
here.
yeah, for.
Let me, write it down.
Yeah.
And then the only other one is under level 1, whatever, there's a URL. And this is, I guess it's tied with the question, which is, do we ever want to cite URLs versus just have it as a link?
Yeah, that should just be a link at the end.
Exactly, so,
So that's number 5.
Yeah, I agree that that's the kind of thing we're doing.
That's the
yeah,
same.
I think we should.
Yeah.
I was planning on doing that.
What number?
Great, okay.
Under level 1, number 5, there's a URL versus just adding a link.
Sorry,
That's what we should be doing.
14?
Yeah, my vote as a extravagant thing would be actually do both, because when it's printed on paper, you want to see it.
I don't know why
Maybe
it's
underneath,
misbehaving.
as I footnote.
Like where you put them,
My apologies, board docs is a little
Maybe
fuzzy
one
right
page.
now.
Well, as long as you've got notes.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
There you go. Yep. Okay.
You know about the URL, you said maybe. Okay. Yep, no problems. All right. So now we're really good with 251, right?
Yep.
All right. All right, and so what was your concern about 330, 323, 423, 523?
But all three of them, which, they're all essentially identical. Under definition, we say, for purposes of this policy, tobacco includes other smoking products. And that came out of, we're trying to say, so there's two things we're trying to regulate here. One is tobacco of any form, whether it's smoked or not. And one is smoking of any form, whether it's tobacco or not.
Right.
And the way we have it done here is tobacco includes other smoking products, and then later on we
That's not
say,
tobacco.
we treat it as tobacco because we defined it as tobacco. Even though it's not tobacco.
I know, we can actually define tobacco as something.
Yeah.
Tobacco
Doesn't make
is.
any word we want.
Beautiful thing, that's
And I think that's ambiguous, and the title of the policy, and that way it's ambiguous too. I think there's two separate things we're trying to.
Let me see how we do
regulate.
222. Let's look at 222, because that's our other one.
What are you looking at? 220.
Okay, so that's what we need to use the definition that's consistent with 222.
Yeah, I thought we
That's,
were-
I thought, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what we're attempting to do. So we need to copy the definitions section from 222, and that's the definitions we should be using.
So all three under
And all-
definitions, copy or paste.
Copy, yeah, so under definitions in 222.
Did we change the title of 222 also include?
Yep.
Smoking, yeah, can we do
Yep.
that with these?
So
Yeah,
now
they
it's
are.
already-
They are in the draft
There's a
one.
more specific definition of both, which is what we.
Which is what,
Yeah.
that's what we wanted to put into
Right.
this one, and it just.
Okay, I thought we had.
I thought we did too, it just didn't get in there, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay,
So
that was.
what we're looking to do, Brooke, in 323, 423, 523, is to use the definitions as they're put under currently 222, which is use of tobacco and smoking-related products. And so just replace that. So that's gonna be it's gonna be a new first reading then.
Repeat this reading.
It's not,
Or new.
well, it's not repeating because we're making changes to it, right? So it's gonna be new. Right. It was a first reading last time, then we made a bunch of changes to it, so now it's gonna be a new first reading. So when we have the board prohibits tobacco use by employees, I would say instead of changing, when we're talking about tobacco, then I think we need to probably change that in the policy. The board prohibits tobacco use by employees on their property, so we now want to say, the same thing that's under authority in 222, the board prohibits tobacco use and possession by blah, 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 or smoking related product use. Let me see if we made that change in here. Yeah, so we didn't add that second line. That's in 222 right now under authority. It says the board prohibits smoking related products use and possession by students. So obviously not students, we're not talking students, it's going to be whatever, the 323, 423, whatever employment group we're looking at. So we're going to use that sentence, add that sentence into the authority for all three of those policies too. Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's definitions, authority change, second sentence. At least we can copy right from our own policy at times.
Yeah, we don't have to.
I'm not inventing anything right now. Yeah, that looks right. Anything else, guys?
That's it for the 23s.
Well, the only thing in addition to the newer language is adding this specificity of Robbins Park, which isn't on 222. Do you want to keep that?
Yeah, I was curious, why do we say?
Yeah, that is interesting.
It's that special.
That's the
I
only
know,
difference between the two,
Because it's
so.
all school property.
Yeah,
That's bizarre that we added that in there.
I think we should just carry the 222 language and not use the language that's found in these current revisions.
In the entire authority section?
Yeah.
So I'm just comparing the two.
Yeah.
So the newer language has this very specific location,
Yeah.
which seems odd.
Right, including our part, including Field of Dreams, we could put everything out there if we wanted, but I don't think we need to. So yeah, so I would really just make it consistent with what the authority is in 222.
Okay.
And just replacing, obviously, students with employees. Yeah. Now, we're good? Everyone?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, so now confidential communication. So we did the policy last time. We can talk about the policy if there's any changes. The AR we didn't have last month.
I have a minor comment on the policy. But it's not significant. Are we on the?
Yep. Yeah, I'm in the edit mode, so if you.
Yes, right in the purpose there where it says as identified in the accompanying regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't that be the accompanying uppercase administrative regulation?
Yep.
Other than Oxford Campus, that's all I
All right, that's the policy. Now the reg.
I have two comments on the reg.
Okay.
One is under guidelines, part E. It says, district personnel should be aware that pregnancy on its own probably does not qualify as jeopardizing health. That's presumably based on chapter and verse of some kind, like, is that, should we be citing some reference there?
I'm sure there's a case.
Is it, I don't know, if it's law or if it's regulation, if it's statute, if it's.
I'm sure it's case law.
It's not statute, it's come out through some decisions and analysis of the
Mhm.
statutes and regulations.
Does pregnancy, that does not guarantee 504 protection, correct? Or no?
Correct.
Correct, that's probably where it came from.
As a statement of policy, it seems odd to say it probably doesn't, to me. Is it because of-
Well, I think let's just be very clear, it wants to direct personnel. Just because the person's pregnant doesn't mean then that in and of itself waives, a confidentiality, right?
I mean, you could say based on case law, based on,
These situations are very, very fact specific.
Yeah.
To determine when health and welfare is at issue. A lot of this guidance has come from in-service presentations that have been done. It's hard to come up with clear, hard, and fast rules as to when health and safety is impacted and when it's not. It's very, very situational dependent. So that's why the guidelines are a little bit loose.
well, is this, I mean, this is AR, are we in AR or?
Correct.
This is
Yes.
AR.
We're in AR, so maybe it's okay, I think it's. I don't know, that
Yeah.
just felt odd to have that sort of vague
Right.
guidance in there, but.
Unfortunately, the law is vague
Yeah.
and lacks guidance,
The
yeah.
other thing I had was under the internet, part B,
B,
a little further
All
down,
right.
B.1.
Yeah,
Really? So we're encouraging our staff to send email to a misbehaving student
Yeah, this
saying
is
that
all
they're
for
aware
the
of
in-service.
inappropriate conduct on social media?
this is all in-service stuff, isn't it?
That does not seem like something we should be advocating.
Right.
Certainly not in writing.
Yeah, this was all, honestly, this was taken from an in-service.
We could advocate it maybe verbally, but advocating that in writing seems to me to be risky.
Point B or the subpoints.
Some point
Subpoint one.
specifically.
I mean, I would take away all three of the subpoints and just list, I don't see why we need
Yeah, I
examples.
think if Ken were here, you would say somewhere down the lines, it's the for example.
Yeah, I think we take,
Examples
for example,
versus-
off and down.
They're not specifically saying that you're doing these things, but I get your point, Mark.
Yeah, I don't see
think
why
we
we need
should-
examples.
I think we can get rid of all these
Okay.
things.
Yeah, I would take, for example, and then 1, 2, and 3 off.
So you can drop this can be accomplished in various ways then also, right?
Yeah,
you know, if we look at this, and I go back to a conversation that Phil and I had, we attended a workshop at the IU a few weeks ago, and then I was at the superintendent's retreat, and we are actually, as a countywide superintendent's group, investigating software that would just scope things over, and if certain buzzwords, self-harm, et cetera, pop up, a notice would come to the district, which sort of countermands all of this. Because now we are, I don't want to say we're actively looking, but we're going to be on the alert, and should an email, now Snapchat wouldn't be covered, but Facebook, et cetera, they scan the internet, and if they find a connection to us and they find anything of concern involving self-harm, violence, et cetera, we would get an alert. Does that change that? And maybe
It
we
doesn't
can think a
change
little more
my
about it.
concern, because my concern.
No, I'm just thinking about the way this is written. Does
Yeah.
it change
Oh.
all of that?
Well, it's still learning confidential information, however that may happen, it may happen because we have this, active monitoring going on. Or it may happen because somebody brought it to someone's attention,
We
or,
can take the word inadvertently out.
Inadvertently? Okay. So strike inadvertently.
yeah.
where's it?
Because we feel we have to be proactive these days, given the way the world is.
Oh, so just
Under internet.
may
ed,
discover,
Oh,
yeah, because it is an inadvertently always.
No, this is going to be purposeful.
Yeah, so-
This is weird, because this is all under pregnancy. This is not under like something more general.
I thought this was confidential
yeah, we're
communication.
removed,
Right, oh, yeah, this is,
we're confidential.
yeah, thank you. It's not just part of the
May
pregnancy section.
discover. Huh?
Thank you.
But I still like the idea of at least dropping B1, if not dropping.
I said we drop all
of
the
that,
examples.
right?
And,
Including one more sentence.
yeah, this can be accomplished in various
Drop
ways.
also.
That sentence start
Yeah.
going down to
Yeah,
the
right.
examples. Good. Drop that, and you took away the word inadvertently from the A. Good.
That's all I have on 207.
So there's a small typo under E5, there's the S, like arguments, and more substantive would be, did we say that at the very top, we were going to also add in 253 policy and AR as a reference in terms of it being related? That's part of the discussion from last time.
Where's your extra?
So under E,
The old
fifth one.
one.
there's just an S missing in guardians. And then at the very top is what I'm referencing in terms of being more substances.
I'm not seeing the missing S.
I'm not seeing.
Actually,
Because we took
Oh,
the
yeah.
S out.
well, the new, the older.
It's okay. Whatever.
F5, maybe I'm reaching here, but pressuring a student to discuss or not discuss a pregnancy and/or an abortion with her parent's guardian. There's a male involved in this too. Could that also cover not discussing it or not pressuring a male student who's involved in such a situation? And again, maybe I'm stretching. Maybe I'm not making my point clearly.
Yeah.
I would just take up, yeah, students.
Pressuring a student to, with parent's guardian, get rid of the her.
I would say with the student's parent,
Oh, the students, okay, then that covers,
all the situations.
yeah, all the whole situation. Okay, thank you.
So Brooke, what I was referencing is if you go back to the very top, the
Yeah.
related district policies in New York. I believe the last time we discussed whether or not we we're going to add under that policy in AR 53.
For 4?
Yeah, but we can discuss it. I thought we were going to.
Ryan, what you three?
Gender expression.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, we did.
We did.
We did.
Okay.
Is it?
Ivy.
Policy, does that have a addendum, right?
It does. And that is called gender expression, gender expansive and transgender students.
253.
Yep.
They're expansive.
Yep.
Student
And transgender.
and transgender.
Something else I remember. Right down, or is it
It's a difference,
possibly?
I know.
I know, right. No, I mean, I just thought of that was the problem, I can't remember what I was gonna say. I can't, nothing's coming in my head. Anything else? All right. All right, so 207. That'll be second reading. All right, so we change the subsection. Policy. All right, second reading, adoption and approval. Good. All right. And, yeah, we said 254 is fine. All right, next. We'll do review, I'll start with 230. Well, let's actually, we can start with 808 because we can get this down here.
So we're now at review.
We're gonna do 808 first,
Okay. Food service.
under review, yeah.
Okay. Under review. Under review.
Yeah, so we have a policy and we also have the administrative regulation. There's not much change, obviously, to the policy. Most of it is just taking out the milk for free milk.
I can offer a clarification. At the bottom, school meal accounts. There is, for number 3, it says that we should include a procedure for providing students with meals when the student forgets or loses his or her money. With the inclusion of Act 55, the procedure is to offer the free meal or the reimbursable meal
Okay,
to each, and then the student just incurs the charge.
okay.
But that should go, the specific should go in the AR. This bullet simply says that the AR should include this procedure.
Okay, so we'll make sure that the AR.
Let's make sure the AR
AR
includes
now.
that.
Okay.
Includes, we just give it.
Will this link to school meal account procedures, is that the link to the AR?
Yeah, that's ambiguous, that was one of the.
Yeah,
So that
comments
should
here.
be changed.
The-
Yeah, that should
The
be-
link text should say that.
Very
it's limited to AR.
Yeah, that
It should be the standard link to the AR.
Well, I'm not sure if the
It's, it is, it's, yeah, if you click on it, it's like,
but it's not just the A,
no,
it's
it's
not,
not.
it's not just the AR.
No, there is a different document.
It's sort of like a
It's a
snippet out of, yeah.
That's bizarre.
Is that what is there when you click on the
Yes.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yes.
And that's, it should
link?
be,
It should be the AR.
AR,
It
yeah.
is like there.
That's,
I agree, that's not what that is,
that's
but
weird.
once it's approved, I think we can do that.
All right, so let's look at,
You want to look at the AR then?
yeah, was there any other questions to, or any comments about the policy?
no.
No, okay. So our policy's good for the moment.
Until they change.
So, give us a few minutes.
So,
See what we can do.
the regulation, does that work for you under school meal charge policy?
All right, so let's look at the regulation.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
If we go to the administrative reg, the section under school meal charge policy,
Yes.
does that work for you?
Yes,
Okay,
It includes what you just said about.
yes.
yeah.
About giving a free meal.
The first sentence under school meals charge policy.
Yes.
Right.
Right. It's not the way you said it, though. I mean, I think it says the same thing, but Kristen, but it isn't the way you said it earlier. Does the language still looks good to you?
It does.
Okay.
Didn't we talk about the students eligible for free and reduced lunch should be kept confidential, but we had a conversation here a couple months ago about when that,
We have a form.
Waiver.
We have a waiver form that was developed.
okay,
So parents can choose to have information shared. The fallback, the default is we don't share unless parents elect to have it shared. But that's a separate form.
Okay.
is that it?
So that's attached, that
That's
form is
attached.
attached to the regulation.
Gotcha.
Regulation.
To the, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that, here's that sharing information
the
about
bottom
programs.
All the way down.
Fine.
I do wonder if it would be helpful to include the default language to say, we do not share this information, however,
If a
and then
parent-
guide the parent to the two options, which are complete this form, submit it to me and I can share, or they can access the information via their school cafe account and forward it upon, like, to whomever.
We'll put that under confidentiality.
Do you want to forward that language?
I'll write the
Why don't you
language
do
for
that?
that.
Why don't you write that
All
up?
right,
absolutely.
So that we're
Right, and then
doing
so-
what you are doing.
Okay.
So then that would make sense, we put that under the confidentiality, the first section,
Right.
under the AR.
Right.
We have, this is about class trips, where students.
It's a lot, it's
Sliding
about
scale.
testing, on a sliding scale for testing, and some class trips, and some other things.
Okay,
But we can't,
He's in shape of those organizations that help.
right.
right, but we no longer hand out the lists, which we were doing, which is
Not good.
bad. So, well, they do, but this way parents can make a decision.
Additionally, I believe one of the big changes in this piece was, from the last AR, was making very clear that we are not talking specifically to children regarding their negative balances. We're directing those communications to the parents and guardians. The caveat to that would be, this is regarding the reimbursable meal. If the child did not have enough money to cover an a la carte purchase, we discreetly advise the child that they don't have enough money for the a la carte purchase, but that they, and alternatively, could receive a reimbursable meal
So who tells them that
at the register.
at the register?
The policy, as far as what the state has offered us, is for the how many meals must or when the notifications go out to the parents after 5 meals, whether breakfast or lunch, our families receive notifications at the point where they're in debt, period.
Right.
So that's one thing to note. So regardless if it's 5 meals or 1 meal, as soon as their balance becomes negative, they're alerted through the primary contact on school eSchool is imported into the school messenger system and then sent on.
So we have to change.
So we can put at least, yeah, or like,
You're gonna modify that.
yeah, we can modify that in the writing.
Outstanding account balance is negative, that's it.
When a student's outstanding balance. No, when a student's outstanding balance exceeds 5.
So the exceeds 5 language, that's
That's
what's
different.
required. You could add a sentence to the end of that paragraph and say, the district reserves the right to send notice prior to
Concord.
Yeah.
the above periods, or he can.
Maybe we don't need it, because the first sentence says, parents, guardians are advised of their child's negative account balance through the district approved software. Okay, so like, we don't give it a time limit. The next sentence is when we say, when the student's outstanding balance reaches or exceeds 5, and at least 2 requested payments will be, at least 2 payments will be sent, which shall also include. I don't know, I mean, I think the first sentence kind of covers what it doesn't say we have to do it when we hit 5, we could do it before that.
Yeah, we can absolutely do it before that.
Right.
It just needs to be noted that this is when we're going to do it. So that when I get audited by the state next February, they say, oh, okay, you're doing it immediately and not at 5, which it meets the minimum requirement.
So you're saying
We
we
should
need
put
definite
something-
language.
Yeah.
Need definite language.
So you need to have it.
I apologize for Docs is being funny
Oh,
again, so
We're
I will.
not ready to, yeah. All right.
But I'm in the Google Doc myself that you
Okay.
share with me because I don't have the drafts. So I'm just making a note that I can recommend language.
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't see anything.
Additionally, it was recommended by Ed, I believe, to discuss or to add in that there may be donations that, or families or organizations that are requesting to submit donations to cover some of the balances. They can't be, those specific donations can't be commingled into the food service account, but I think that it's time, because I have gotten some calls about this, to really develop a procedure for accepting those funds and disseminating them out.
For specific kids?
So there is a new paragraph. in
That's-
either.
That's up to, I guess, the policy.
So they would go into a
You're
separate
gonna
account
bring
and then
That's very
transferred over to cover
Right.
shortages.
We actually discussed this at PASBO, they need to go into the general fund and then be transferred to food
Right.
service. Which will, of course, will require board approval.
Right, yeah.
So the only comment I have on this paragraph is that where it says such donated funds may not be commingled, I think that should be such donated funds must not be commingled. It should be a must instead of a may.
I only need from time to time.
Additionally, there is another opportunity I think that we need to discuss, and that is when we have graduating seniors who have existing balances, some families have requested to donate that money for unpaid lunch balances. This is permissible pending board approval. I have some language that I've attached to the Google Doc. I think that, again, we still need to get it board approved that that can actually stay in my fund.
Yes, that.
Because it's already there.
It's already there,
Yeah.
right.
But how we apply that needs to be designed, and there has to be a procedure attached.
That's
For sure.
wonderful, if families do that. It's lovely.
It really is, but up until now, we haven't
But
had.
you're right, we need a process in place.
Absolutely.
Be a nice thing to promote too, at least make it known.
Absolutely.
And you have $8 left, and you can
Yeah.
always just.
It would really, and I mean,
Something.
That's fine.
outside of really helping other students,
Yeah.
I have to say administratively, it would really help me
We
too.
have to send them a check.
And yeah, so
Like
you have to
$8.
$1.03.
create a vendor, create a rec, a purchase order, mail a check.
Business office and.
So you have some language then
Yes.
you
I
can
do.
share with Brooke?
Yes.
We can't have a policy that says if the balance is below a certain amount, then it does not get returned because of costs to
We
return.
have in the past or in some places, but I don't,
What's
I
that?
believe you can do it
It's the
anymore.
parents' money.
We used to have.
So if it's $3 and it costs us more than $3 to process, we still have to process it.
Now, technically, you could include in the policy a processing fee. That's not allowable. There's a surcharge for running a credit card, Dr. Levinowitz. But there's only one other piece that I'm a little bit concerned with because it was specified so many times, and it was something that came up with our audit as well. And that's really talking about when delinquent debt becomes bad debt. In the beginning, our understanding was that the debt can be continued on until graduation. Now the state is saying 1 year.
Saying,
But we also have to prove through procedure that it's become bad versus delinquent. And that procedure needs to be explained out within our policy or our AR.
We can't just say if the reasonable steps have been taken.
No, they want to know, what's the reasonable steps?
whatever the auditor
Yeah.
wants to know, let's get it in there.
Okay.
So I have some recommendations for language as well.
Right.
And we also spent a seminar, I went to a seminar at PASBO, the same thing. For the general fund audit, the food service audit, and then the special food service audit that Kristen was referring to next February.
Can I ask a question about the donated funds? So as those come in other ways, how would those get applied to negative balances? Would it be done equitably, or is it just like how?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think that the first thing I would say is there a specific student that you'd like this information or this to go to? However, remember, I'm not going to disclose which students have this
That's the only
need.
thing though.
And then after that, I guess I really would say, should this not go to either even out the debt or to eliminate the highest debtors? So for example, I have an elementary school student whose debt is $275 right now. So should it go to that student and knock out the highest debt, to which maybe the family, to retrieve $275 is harder? I mean, I definitely can come up with some suggestions, and also because this is new in school food service, we're all trying to figure out the best practices.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
tough.
our district is focusing on helping the students, and then other districts are focusing on like, are we going to debt collection agencies, so on and so forth. So we're very fortunate in this district,
Oh, I've heard those discussions
Yes.
in my,
So
Yeah.
yeah.
and I don't think that we're there at all,
No.
but I can definitely come up with some reasonable ways to apply this money, and then I think it's up to the board to see what's the most fair, and, what's the most, applicable.
we'll work on that and try to come up with something.
Yeah, so that's
It
it.
is. Because we were talking about the seniors, they may want, it may be logical to leave all the money at the high school, but those usually aren't the highest accounts.
Right.
No, really,
It's
yeah,
usually
middle school,
elementary.
elementary piece.
Is that check
But-
for you?
No.
Too true.
Yeah.
Kristen,
Yes.
if a family says, I want our surplus to go to a particular student, and that student does not actually have outstanding debt,
Then it's applied, then we need to have the procedure, then it's applied by
Then
option two.
they're still able to donate, actually. They could apply right to that student.
So you
Right, I think we would say it applied, and if this person doesn't have debt or any leftover remaining debt, then the rest of the money is distributed however necessary.
well, I mean, if I just, I mean, that's like, I mean, I understand, like, I have two kids, and the older one graduates, I want to just put it on the envelope account.
Yep,
If I want to put it on my neighbor's account, that's perfectly permissible.
absolutely. And we do that all the time now.
Okay.
Yeah. That at the end of the year, I'll get calls saying like, can I put this towards my 10th graders? I have a senior. And that's like a really normal procedure. That's completely doable.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so we don't need to cover that.
But I mean, we might even create some kind of donation form.
Yes.
So it's the person who's donating, we can specify, do you want it in the school? Do you want it towards, this grade level, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
And if they donate, can they deduct that from their taxes?
Great question, right? You know what? There's
We're not gonna
actually,
give them anything, okay?
If
They
they are
can,
writing,
sure they can.
if they are writing a check out to the general fund, which was going to go back into food service, and they receive goods or services for their, yes, the answer is yes, and such a letter will be generated. It's going to be, but when they're saying, I'll take my seniors or my ninth graders or whatever and apply it, that's going to be way too,
yeah.
for $3.60 or $1 or whatever.
Yep.
All right, so we're looking at food service, the policy is ready for first reading, and then we'll bring back the AR to the May 29th
Okay.
policy meeting, so then if all the changes that have been discussed will be on that, and we can discuss it then.
Good for that.
We have everything in the policy that we want, that we need.
Yes. Great, in my opinion.
All right.
As of this.
As of,
Yeah.
April 23rd.
Yep, if you give us more time, we'll find out.
Yep, I'm sure the state will come up and see this stuff. No problem. Is it more the state or the federal?
Actually, it's more the state. There is a federal meal charge
The oldest
policy.
fund back.
However, the state enacted Act 55, which is specific to Pennsylvania, which talks about, the federal reg says that you have to give some meal. The state reg says you have to give unlimited meals. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kristen. Now we're going to go to 239.
We want to this one.
We're going to talk about foreign policy. Just if you want to listen in.
Just, no problem. You're voting on my trial at the FDA,
Oh,
but
okay.
it'll come out when it comes out.
Okay.
We move into
239. Oh, there we go. All right, so we brought this back. We had this at the last legislative meeting ready for a second reading and adoption. In between that time, I was contacted by Ms. Hahn, who had some concerns about this. And obviously, she's here and she'll be able to give us public or community input after it's discussed. But some of the issues, I know that, and I think the rationale for why the changes were proposed in the first place. One of the concerns is that whether a student, a foreign exchange student, comes to the district and does not meet the proficiency requirements, what does that mean? Okay, and so the advice that we have heard is that if a student doesn't meet it, then we are required for the English language learners program. So that's one of the things we want to talk about, just to talk about the law and about that requirement.
We would like to ask Dr. Minor to give us some information because students who come, whether they are resident or exchange students, we are obligated to provide service. Want to address that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So this has become much more clear with guidance through the state and the federal government that when a student comes as an exchange student, we have to determine whether or not they qualify for English language learner services the same way we qualify other students. I have heard that one of the questions regarding that is step one is the home language survey, and therefore if a student is residing in the home of a resident who speaks English, does that bypass that? So the intention of the home language survey is actually the home that the child comes from, where their parents are not, where they're temporarily in residence with the district. So in all cases, with the exception of an English-speaking country, the student would meet all of the qualifications on the home language service. They spoke a different language at birth, their parents speak a different language at home, those sorts of things. And so we would move on. And if we were to skip that and try to work around that and say, well, they're in an English language speaking home, and therefore we're not going to proceed with the assessments, we would be in violation of what the intentions of ESSA and the state are in terms of providing services to those children. If they do qualify for services, they would go through the same procedure, then we would have to provide services in the amount that they had generated through their assessment. So for instance, a student might get only an hour a week, a student might get 5 hours a week, depending on the level of need that the English language teacher recognizes in their series of screenings. The other important thing, or two other important things to note, is if the child is receiving English language services, they do have to take the Keystone exam and the PSSA exam if they're in the grade level where that would happen. And now with the Future Ready PA Index and other ESSA reporting tools, we're going to be reported on our population of students who are English language learners as well. So they would figure into our report when we're looking at our school's overall success. English language learning is going to become a part of that. That hasn't really been a part of that in the past. And then the final piece that I think is really important in a district with the population of Upper Dublin is that we have only 2 ESL teachers. So we have one that services all 4 elementary schools and one that services both the middle school and the high school. And so right now we have 24 students total in the middle school and high school. That's an appropriate population for that teacher to serve. They're able to do it. With 2 students coming in as per the suggested policy right now, if both of those students will require services, that would be in the realm of 10% of the total service that our English language teacher is providing would be to non-resident children. And if it were to go 4, obviously it would be 20% and so on and so forth. And so at some point, and although if the board wants to welcome foreign exchange students that don't speak English, I have no horse in that race other than to tell the board that we would require additional staff at some point to service those children. So it's a potential funding issue when we cross a line and we're not able to serve our resident children. And then also, I would just want to make sure that the board was well informed about the potential for these students to be reported in our data as English language learners and whether or not they had successfully met the requirements of Keystone and other exams.
Great. So I guess the first question I have are just where is home defined? Who's given us that guidance? Is it the feds? Is it PDE? Who is that? I hadn't seen a definition of home versus district home versus home. Yeah.
I haven't seen that either. I don't know if our attorney has seen it. But I can say that a lot of the questions that are in the home language survey, and I can share it with you, aren't actually about, and make sure that you have our home language survey.
And that's what I'm looking for. What home language survey?
Yeah, so I can actually share with you the one that the district uses. But the questions pertain to what was the first language spoken at birth, what is the language, and so they really clearly are questions about where the child was born and raised, where their parents live, not where they're temporarily residing.
These are the questions that we ask when anyone enrolls in the district.
Right, so the whole language, I can read it off to the...
We set this, right? We set the home language surveys that we did the district home language.
So the federal government gives guidance to the states, and then the states give guidance to us about what must be included, right? So the question number 1 is, what was the student's first language? Question number 2, does the student speak a language other than English?
Yep.
Question number 3, what languages are spoken in your home? The intention there.
So that gets sent?
When a child registers,
Any child.
their parent
Right.
gets that.
Let's talk about exchange students. That form gets sent
We would need to send it to their parent.
in whatever language,
Yes, we have to translate the form.
and that's what we currently do, to assess that information.
So first we do a home language survey. Depending upon how they score on the home language survey, then they can go through the identification with the family interviews.
But if it's an exchange from Germany, just to be absolutely clear, the people filling out the answers to that form are going to be their German parents.
Yes, and it's not a scored form per se. They don't get an X number of. It's that if the ESL teacher has reasonable suspicion, let's say, that the child may need English language services, it's on us to find that, very much like a child find. If we believe that a child may be special education or may be gifted, we have to dig deeper in that, and it's really, ESSA is really trying to make sure that school districts don't not provide services to kids who need them, right? So they really want us to pick up any kid who we suspect may need
Including
services
students that
and
are
support.
only here for a year.
Correct.
Make sure that no one's slipping
Yeah.
Right.
through the cracks.
Why do we use a different form for the home language survey than what PDE has?
What form are you referring to that PDE has?
So I see PDE has a home language survey, like on their website. So I'm just wondering why our form differs from what PDE has.
It sounds like the questions are the same, though. It may just be in a different order.
Yeah, the questions are, is a language other than English spoken in the child's home? No, yes, language. Does your child communicate in a language other than English? And then 3, what is the language that your child first learned to speak? Those are the 3
I
questions.
think those are the 3 questions that are required by ESSA.
Ours just are in different.
Okay, so we're using, I mean, that's, it sounded like they were slightly different.
Yeah, we have to, the ESSA provides 3 minimum questions that you have to make sure that you include, and those are the 3. So it gives LEAs some flexibility in terms of how they're ordered and presented. And if you go on the federal government's website, they have a toolkit and different options for that.
Okay, so,
Right, it is still ambiguous here. The reason I asked the question I asked is, when the question is the language other than English spoken in the child's home, the reason I asked is who's interpreting that?
yeah, who's,
Is it
finding
their
it?
German parents or their upper Dublin temporary parents?
Yeah, are their
Whatever the
parents,
right term
their
is.
guardians, are they considered guardians when they're here or not?
I don't.
I don't believe it.
I don't believe that their parents lose their
No.
legal rights in the way that a guardian.
They're an exchange student, but I've hosted exchange students.
Right.
I certainly was never a guardian. AFS would take care of all of that sort of information.
But, so, this PDE form has the same ambiguity about,
It's not trying to find
No
out
one
where
defines
you're staying.
home,
It's
yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
determine
yeah,
what the influences are. Is this a child we need to look at?
yeah.
So a child who's spending a year with an English-speaking family, that's well and good, but we need to know their English based on their background.
Yeah.
Is this something that needs to be a flag for us, for our child find purposes? So it may seem ambiguous, but
I think it is ambiguous. but-
I think the intent, from all the training that we've all received over the years, we know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And then speaking with Donna Ward extensively about the process currently and historically, it sounds like through the AFS application, there is a language proficiency screener that you use. The historical data shows though that some of them that were deemed proficient, in fact, did need the ELL services once they got here. And you're not going to send them back because now they don't meet the standard.
I think from my point of view, if we have kids here, we don't want them in the ELL classes, right? I mean, we don't want them to need the ELL classes.
But I think,
Right.
and when we spoke, you gave wise advice.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that in a policy.
Well, I'm not, right. No, that's the purpose of it, and so then it's figuring out, I mean, it's that we want to make sure that the kids that are here are able to be proficient and fluent enough that they wouldn't need the services for a couple of different reasons. I would think for maybe the experience, but also because of the financial implications and all those implications that we have. We don't want to have 2 teachers do this and the costs associated with that. It's the balance of this.
Because we were having difficulty kind of pinpointing what would be the measure and what would be the tool used to establish whether or not the ELL was necessary.
Right.
I think your advisement of we operate under the assumption that ELL services would be necessary.
I think you have to assume that that's going to be the case, because you can try to assess proficiency on the front end, but the bottom line is until the kids are here and you go through that whole step-by-step process, you're not going to know whether they need services
But so-
until after that.
Right, so when has this rule started? When have we started having to put kids in these classes?
So there was a court case around it, I want to say in England, and so they started issuing BECs around it in 2017.
Okay.
And then just also, in terms of the ambiguity about that term home, because that was my first thought as well,
Right.
I just would, for what it's worth, on the PDE website, in response to this, it says districts are required to screen foreign exchange students using the L identification procedure. So I think that they're basically saying this isn't you don't have a pass here. You need to take them through the screening process. And so even though they don't address whether the word home or not, and of course typically for us, the screening process, part one, is we have no idea what the kid's background is. And so we start with home language. In the case of foreign exchange students, we absolutely know what their background is. They're coming from another country where they speak a different language, or they're coming from an English-speaking country. So, again, the state, as is often the case, isn't as clear as we would like. The fact that they specify that you have to screen exchange students, that's new. And the IU did present this to all of the federal programs coordinators last year to make us aware of it, because in the past districts hadn't done that, and make sure that we were living up to our responsibility.
Okay, so we started doing that, screening all the kids when?
So we've always done home language survey for kids who are native. In terms of the foreign exchange students, we became conscious of it through the IU last year, but apparently it started to appear in the BECS in 2017. Of course, I came here last year, so
Right.
it's the first year I was looking at it.
So we've
So I'm
been screening
trying-
just this year or last year too? The foreign exchange students?
So that the ESL teacher actually made me aware of it, and that she would need to screen and service students last year. And I don't know if she had, I'd have to talk to her about it if it happened in years past, but like I said, the IU at a federal programs meeting this year sent out, a PowerPoint, actually last year.
So, yeah, my concern, I'm trying to figure out the reality of how many kids have come in our school so far that have been placed in the ELL or.
I can-
Yeah.
Last year,
the ones who were in-
did when we had to.
Right.
I cannot
Is that when
testify
it was
to
yellow?
what happened previously.
Right, and I'm just
Wondering
wondering,
about-
since we've known about this and had the screening, like how,
I get that
anyone this
information
year,
for
I
you.
know we had at least one last
The
year.
foreign exchange students.
Yeah, it's just foreign exchange students, this is just applying to foreign exchange.
It sounds like Michelle's data. Do you have an answer?
I have the foreign exchange students all the way back to 2013-14.
Right.
They were.
So which ones of those were needed
Required
additional
ELL.
services? Right.
There is another point that may not be on your radar, but something I had to deal with last year when I was really acting as Director of Transportation on matters, at least that came up to the business office. And I contacted our solicitor, although I didn't speak with that. Transportation. And the situation was not with the students that the board had approved, because of course they're entitled to use it. This was from another school, residents within our community, and they needed transportation to a different school that we didn't service.
Right.
And so I was pushing back on that, always being the business administrator, but speaking with the solicitor, we had to provide transportation.
But a foreign exchange student that was in Abu Dhabi, was going to another,
Yeah.
was housed in Abu Dhabi.
Yes, was
Right.
staying.
Going to North Penn. or
Right, so
No,
it's like.
no, it was a private parochial
Kind of
school.
like GA. Right, if they were going to GA or they're going to
Oh,
St.
okay,
Joe
so,
or the Crown or
right.
something.
Not
But
yet,
again,
couldn't go.
those are all ones that we service, would have been
Right, so we don't
situated.
have any, yeah.
But this was not the case, and it wasn't for the entire year, so.
Right.
But just, there was additional expense.
But we can't policy ourselves around that. That's just what we have to live with, so. Okay. So, I guess that, one of the question I have is that it's how many kids are needing the services that are currently being brought into us? Has it been,
What's going on just this year?
yeah, this year?
What do we have this year? How many
Because
this year?
There are two students.
We have two kids.
We have 2 foreign exchange students.
We have, yes, let me go back up here.
And
It looks like this year there are 2 students. Last year there were 5, but one didn't work out, and was.
And then,
No,
two-
one came in the middle of the year.
2 from this year, are they
Two
are we
this year.
providing special services for that?
Am I allowed to
Yeah.
answer?
I can cross-reference her list against the list that I have from people last year.
yeah, I'm just wondering, how big of an issue, are all of the kids that are coming in, do they need the special, do
Well,
they need?
they
the-
come-
According to the chart that was provided by one of our community members, one of the 2 does require services, but I don't have authoritative data.
Right. I think I'm saying the wisdom of the advice that you had provided says that you operate, that they will require it, because we don't have any type of tool that we can say consistently measures whether or not.
Right,
the
that's what we-
official is
Yeah.
there. So we plan for that they do, and if they
Right.
don't, then we'll
Right.
just one less.
And they don't.
Right, then they don't.
And one of the reasons we wrote the policy the way we did is we're not necessarily limiting to 2 foreign exchange students every year. It's just after 2, somebody has to come back and get board approval.
Oh, I thought it was very limited.
It says unless otherwise approved by the board on recommendation of the superintendent or designee.
Okay.
So you could have 3 or 4, but they had come back to us.
Since I.
But all of them are approved by us, aren't they? I mean, that's how we've always
I
done
thought
it.
they're always.
So why
They're
does
saying above and beyond the two.
Well,
But
we always-
you can
Because they-
advertise for two, you can solicit applications. If you only get one or two, okay, fine, proceed with those two, they get board approved. If 5 come in, somebody internally has to decide which 2 are we going to recommend, or at that point would come forward to the board and say, we have 5 applications
Mhm.
for students that want to be foreign exchange students,
Mhm.
what can we do? And then that's a discussion.
And that too could be also at the same time where you're saying, well, how many students do we have in the ELL program for that year?
And you
And
can
you know how much
evaluate.
space you have.
Correct.
Because if your capacity is lower that year, then maybe.
But
you
if we
could
let it
take
up to say, instead of having 2, saying we have 4, right? It would still be up to the board, and we could still have that conversation, if we don't have to approve all 4.
And the recommendation from the high school administration, based on conversations I've had, is that they would like 2 to be the number. I'm just adding that to the conversation.
So I think this is the only year we've had 2 for a while. If we look past the last several years, we typically have 4 foreign exchange
We
students.
had some exceptions. We had 2, and then there were some exceptions. We couldn't find a home for one. There were a couple episodes where places was disrupted and we took students.
Right, that's, I mean, I'm looking back at the data, I think I saw the data, and it looked like up until several years ago, or we've had 4 consistently, regardless of the situation. It might have been because of placements or whatever, but we've had consistently 4 kids.
Are we talking about, do we place in just the high school?
Yes.
Yes, because, so the policy,
What surprises me is
15 up.
so many
16.
students, other than the United States, learn English in their home country. Is that
To various
as a
degrees.
second language?
To various degrees of fluency.
I'm just surprised what percentage will come over here, knowing that they're going to come over here and not being proficient.
Well, they may feel Americans are in their
Yes.
home country,
Well, no, that's true,
but it's different when you get here.
And proficiency is a little bit different
That's
when
right.
you're taking the assessment to figure out whether you're entitled to services.
Mhm.
There could be minor areas of weakness that may qualify for just a small amount of services. It could be 30 minutes or an hour. You know, there's various degrees.
And the services are encompassing of 4 areas: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So even though you may speak
Right.
well, you may not read and write well, you may qualify.
And did we say anything about the other services? If they're identified, do we have to test them for gifted, special ed?
Again, under special education, you can interrupt me, they wouldn't have been in the country
Identified?
long enough in order to.
Oh.
Typically, they would not come with
disability.
an IEP. Most countries at this point
We
do
would not
not
have to
identify as we do.
so, yeah, I mean, Michelle, I think we talked about a little bit the procedure, how we get foreign exchange students. I mean, it's not something that we typically seek out. We, in the past, AFS, we've worked primarily, or at least predominantly with AFS, comes to the district with applications, packets for individuals, and to the administration. The administration then either signs off on them, and then that's how they get to a board meeting, for instance. And once they're then, I think, approved by the board, then it goes through a process, a screening process. Is that right, Michelle?
After they're approved by the board, then they come into the
Yes.
traditional testing, as
Exactly.
all students from all
So I
places.
guess with the high school ones, the high school wants to say we're only going to approve 2.
Right. Right.
Which is not what the draft policy says.
Right.
Draft policy says that 2 get in without even discussion by the board, and then above that, might get discussion by the board.
And I think that really needs to be based on how many ELL spots are already taken by our own students at that point, we'll know that.
I would just say, I would
It
also.
doesn't say that in policy, but that certainly would be
Students
an
who
factor.
didn't-
Yeah, and I would say we don't often know, right? I mean, a lot of students who move in and need ELL services move in the middle of the year, move in in spring.
Right.
You know, and so it's very hard to say in any given year how many, even if we think we know in September, it could, you know, one family with 5 kids moves in January, and our numbers are completely different as a percentage, because we do have a very small population, so it's
We
very hard to
had
predict.
that situation a few years ago, prior to you.
Well, we had triplets, you know, move in to kindergarten who all spoke Italian. We had one school that suddenly their ESL population went through the roof, and with one family moving in. And, you know, it's wonderful, and we want the diversity. It's just that from the standpoint that I feel like my responsibility to the board in terms of, you know, keeping you apprised of staffing is if we're adding students voluntarily versus serving our own residents, we just have to be cautious about it.
Okay.
They take the keystones, if we're given the keystones.
If they're identified as English language learners, part of that identification is they have to take the assessments. Because now we have to report on their success.
But they only take like the biology keystone if they're in biology.
Algebra, literature, depending on their year.
Right, but they,
Yeah,
But
there should be a change to that law. That doesn't seem to really make sense if we're trying to test it all, so.
I agree.
And then their performance on those.
None of this makes sense, it's just that we're having.
And then their performance on the WIDA assessment as well.
Right.
Was this the plan that we submitted to the feds? This is all part of that?
No, this is federal.
I figured.
Mhm.
I suggest, it seems like in terms of there's like a two-step process. One, it seems as though we need to write a policy in regards to where our stance is in regards to foreign exchange students. And then there needs to be more specific administrative regulations to all the stuff that we just talked about.
Right.
That's what it seems like, whereas right now it's currently under just policy. But I think what we're really saying is we need to divide these thoughts into two. One is where our stance in terms of we want to have foreign exchange students and restricting those limits, and then adding accompanying administrative regulations that kind of gives more specificity to what we want to do as a result.
Wouldn't the guidelines just be, instead of saying guidelines? that
But I
would be-
think what we're drilling down is that it's getting a lot more.
Complicated, yeah.
So I think that's where we should start, is to see what we're going to draft in policy, what we're going
In
to,
the AR, yeah.
and then add some of the advice of the administration here.
Right, I agree. Okay, so. Because I still don't, we didn't have any sort of. Right, so we still don't have, because we don't have an AR on this at all, so we're gonna need to create a new AR.
Well, I think, like Michelle said, just take the guidelines portion out of the policy, that's the beginning of your AR.
That's the beginning of it, right, and then we can
Yep.
go from there.
Yep.
I would be curious just what other districts, are doing with this, right? I mean,
This is
they all have the same
impacts us
issue.
all.
I think AFS is involved.
I've had no conversations, but I certainly can see that information.
We do have some data on that from the town.
Well, I
It's
think
a good place to
from
start.
from the districts, I think.
Yeah, it would be helpful.
All right, I will do that.
Also on the PD
Okay.
website, they will see what
Today.
level ELL learners there are in district. It's right on the school performance profile.
Yeah.
Policy was in the center.
I will seek that information. Who participates if there are guidelines or policies to forward those?
Yeah, I'll probably start with the MCA, I mean, getting it from MCA.
Well, that's what I do. I'll
Exactly.
contact Mary and she'll send out a list to all the superintendents.
Okay, good. All right,
Should we talk about the other specific proposals and changes? Or do you want to wait until we get this information back to have an implementation?
I don't know, what do you think?
With the guidelines part, I mean,
Yeah, I mean. So part of this is, whatever changes if we make, we should have them made and try to have them approved. Because right now, the deadline for, receiving the applications is July 1st, or at least that's what we're trying to shoot for, right? So I'm just trying to think of, what do we want to do because we're April right now. We can do back-to-back readings in June. We have those 2 legislative meetings, and by policy, we're allowed to use this one as a reading and the next one as a second reading and adoption. So we would still have enough time, I think, but we would have to make sure that we are ready on the policy at least. We're essentially gonna have to be ready on the policy and the AR,
Finish it in May policy.
May 29th meeting,
Yeah.
right. So I guess that's the question.
Whatever discussion we can have now, we probably.
We probably should have it, that's my thought.
Yeah.
You agree? Right.
Or if we just move it to policy, we can move the regulation through
Also,
Well, the regulation, I mean, the thing is, we're not, we not only have one policy committee meeting in May before we hit those next two
I see.
legislative meetings. So that's where, I mean, we're gonna be
Okay, it's fine.
coming up, all right, and so then we can talk with,
You do have a special meeting coming up in 2 weeks.
yeah, that's,
Do you want to discuss
no,
that?
we're not, that is not, this is not on that, that is just for the SGA, the students, so that is very a limited policy meeting, so.
Student impact.
As much as they would, I'm sure, be excited to hear this conversation, I think limiting it just to SGA is gonna be difficult, so, okay. I'm trying to pull this up myself. All right, so one of the things that I know we have had, even though the J1 visa allows kids as young as 15 to come over, the policy always has been 16. That hasn't been a change in the policy. I think that the policy wasn't followed at least once regarding to the age, and we did have a 15-year-old here. However, our policy has always remained 16, and that's not something that that we are seeking to change at this point.
Do we know why it's is there a reason why it's 16? Is there a reason why we're not discussing
Taking it to
Yeah.
lower to 15?
or higher or whatever? I mean,
Right.
Why 16, I guess, is there a magic number in some way, or is it?
I think it's because it's been past practice, that's my
And
imagination.
if you look at school districts that adopt the PSBA policies,
Mhm.
I think it may have been a suggestion in
Right.
that policy from many, many years ago that's just been carried forward. Because that 16 number, any school district that puts an age in there, I've never seen anything but 16.
Mhm.
And my guess is that's why. But I agree that you can go down to 15
Right.
for the J1.
So I think, I had a conversation last week with Donna Ward, and I think and her advice was there's, a certain maturity level at 16, that's what they felt most comfortable with, so, and then,
I mean, I feel like any student who's going through an exchange process has got to be pretty mature, but.
one would think.
One
yeah.
thing, but one of
Is
those
that,
tails.
does past practice not indicate that that's true? I don't know.
And that's where, I mean, we've had, that's been the policy that we've had, so I think we had one child that was under that age. I don't believe there was any issues with that child, but at the same time,
Because I can completely understand why we as a district care about the number, because there's some cost implications and other things. I don't have a clear understanding of why we would care about the age.
I do not know if that's due to class level placement, freshman versus sophomore versus junior, I don't know. In my mind, that would be the only thing that would make that applicable. But that's not a conversation I've had with our guidance office.
You want to make sure they're in high school.
Yeah.
You're dealing with foreign schooling systems, so depending on what the age is of school in other countries, I don't know if the thought was 16 is safe to assume that at 16 you're in high school.
I feel like 15 seems safe to assume you're in high school probably too, but.
By most standards, I would think so as
so
well.
I guess that's one of the questions when we're looking at the policies of these other districts. Is there anybody that has experience with bringing in kids that are 15?
I just asked, I sent it out, and I
Okay.
asked if anyone participates in an exchange program, will they please forward their guidelines or their policies to me?
Okay. All right, so that's one thing we'll be able to look, and then if we see that there are other districts out there that are taking kids at 15, we can follow up with them and see if there's their experiences with that, to see if we would want to modify the policy. And like I said, when we had any issues with 16-year-olds, we've had great experiences with 17-year-olds. I mean, I don't know, that's also going to be digging into the data in our own district to say, are we, I would imagine since we haven't upped the age, or that wasn't a suggested increase by the administration, that we haven't had specific issues with 16-year-olds. So unless there is something that was just overlooked, I don't see a reason to raise the age at this point. So, but I could see an argument that we might want to reduce it if we're based on other information from other districts that said, no, 15-year-olds are the best. We only want 15-year-olds, I mean, maybe, I don't know.
You never know.
You never know? Okay, so we can look at that issue. So we're gonna look at that. So I think one of the things that we,
Oh, what, yeah, the graduate thing, I'm curious about. Does that mean they haven't graduated in their home?
yeah, that's a requirement, they're part of the J1 visa, right? I believe it's a part of the J1 visa requires that they didn't actually complete high school and have started college or only service secondary classes and then come back.
And it is not uncommon for schools to receive requests from students who graduate from another school system and then want to come to the US for a year, whatever the case may be.
Which would make sense, right? I mean, if you think of it from our kids' desk, you know,
Yeah,
they
it's
graduate
exactly
Upward
right.
Evelyn High School and then they take their, you know, take a gap year and their gap year is just to go back to high school somewhere else. I mean, that would make sense to me that they would, people
Yeah.
would want to do that versus trying to mess with their requirements in high school, so.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, a lot of these things, like, obviously they shouldn't be getting a diploma, they can get their certificate, like, coming here for a semester, they don't graduate from high school. That doesn't seem to be controversial.
Okay.
I mean, so one, only other thing is that I know that with, there's other agencies that obviously place foreign exchange students. Our relationship primarily has been with AFS. And in AFS's packet, or application process, there's a screening tool within that to figure out the proficiency levels of kids. So, typically, I think the number has been around how they score, and so we'll be able to, we're ready for community info, we'll talk to Lydia a little bit about that. But I think that the number that is typically has been used, at least by Ms. Hahn, has been around 250 to try to hit that point. So we've seen some kids that haven't hit that level, that have been placed here, that have struggled, that have been placed in ELL. So I don't know if we want to put that somewhere within the guidelines, not specific to AFS, but that we have an idea of what number we want to use with their screening tool or with any agency screening tool. I think that that's something that, as an administration, we would want our administration to be speaking with whatever placement agency is to make sure that the screening tool is acceptable to us. I know that's not, I don't really have any, putting that in here anywhere else about us being, you know, I mean, I think this is part of the acceptance process of their applications. I don't know if we want to have a line in there that we want to make sure that, to highlight that.
It seems like something that could be in the AR, especially where, so ELL is a place that we've identified as a cost burden, potential cost burden
Yeah.
for us. If there are other significant cost burdens, I mean, I think all of those should go into the AR as a factor to consider,
Right.
not necessarily hard and fast rules, but as factors to consider, just so their attention is called to them as part of the process.
So for example, what Ms. Bray brought up in regards to transportation, I thought that language should go into the AR as well.
Yeah.
And there also is a potential impact on data, achievement data.
Yep.
And times being as they are, the dashboard is not taking us away from the SPP.
Right.
That's good.
So yeah, the AR can certainly include a reminder that exchange students factor into our student body and therefore into our state assessment scores without necessarily guidance as to, you know, therefore you should or shouldn't accept them, but it can be a reminder that that's a factor, so both sides of the way are of it.
Right, is there anything else that we as a committee want to talk about regarding this policy?
I think at this point, we have a good sense for what questions we want to ask when we get data back from other districts, et cetera.
Right.
We're going to have a much more difficult conversation next month.
That's my thought too. Are we good? Okay. If not, I would take if everyone agrees to it, a slight detour from our normal agenda and open it up to community input at this point, before we move on to any other issues. Everyone agree with me? Okay. So at this point, we'll start with the community input. I do believe we have one member of the community that's here. That's here. So, Libby, if you'll state your name and your part of the Upper Dublin.
I've done this before.
Awesome. All right. And you are limited to 4 minutes. Do you have?
Should we try to move this camera?
And we want to wait for
Yeah,
Jason,
Jason.
can you help us with this? Sure.
Thank you.
That's not I can.
Yeah, we want to get.
I think
That's
this is
a timer.
okay. You want, okay, I think I'm okay on time. I'm not generally actually a long speaker, but, okay, so let me be ready. Got the stopwatch going?
Yes.
So hello, my name is Libby Hahn, a handler. So in addition to my day job at Pfizer, which you all heard about today, I'm a volunteer with AFS Intercultural Programs. I've been finding host families in Upper Dublin for the past 20 years. Over that time, Upper Dublin has hosted 25 AFS families. And, and again, I look like not to jinx myself, but there have been very few issues, so when you go back and you look through the files, like, there's none that I really know of. Anyway. So Upper Dublin is a great place to live. It was a great place for my children to grow up and go to school. We have a strong sense of community. We're people who participate, which I think is evident by our outsized performance in sports, music, and the arts, and academics, of course. I believe that tolerance and inclusivity are also part of our core values. So that said, we are one of the least diverse districts in our area. We have the lowest percent of English language learners in the area, which is 1.1%, only Bucks County. Bucks County is just a little bit above us, and we know that they are not a very diverse place. In the past, we've welcomed exchange students because we're welcoming. We value that experience for our students. The issues that, I guess we've talked about the number of 2 students and the issue with ESLs. The 15-year-olds and then the people who graduated from their own country are also an issue. So basically, the way that we're looking at it now is we take 2 students. They are likely to be from Northern European countries, or perhaps students who have been particularly good students from other countries. So this year we do have 2 students, one who's in ESL. She's of course from Thailand. The one from Italy she was great. You could see that beforehand and did not need ESL. So the one this year is the first one, probably the Thai from last year would have needed ESL too. Just because Thai is a much harder language. But they recommended, she could have gotten out of ESL after 2 or 3 months, but her host family elected to keep her in, but they kind of suggested that she could leave after a couple of months. Let's see. So, and again, I think, we did have a peak. I don't expect to ever be able to come up with 4 kids again because my son's out of high school and I'm just not in those leagues anymore. So thank you for taking those students because that really was, exchange student or host families just do not grow on trees. Let's see. I would like to suggest that we figure out, do maybe a better job figuring out who might need ESL and who might not. The 15-year-olds to me, I never really, I guess it's coming down to, since there's so many, and I'm going off a little bit off script, since there's so many different parameters, I think limiting, ESL 1, whatever happens, that's, I think it's too bad that we don't have very many, diverse kids, and so therefore we don't have as much ESLs, therefore it impacts our budget. But then when you start adding 15-year-olds and graduates, it's kind of like a package. Like right now, the kid that I would like to have come to Upper Dublin, he's going to turn 16 in October. He plays water polo and he's from Australia. And my big concern is his math grades aren't that great. So it's that package of, we know, I like water polo because they come and they start, even before school starts, water polo or the band. They're already in their activity and they get started. So there's just like a whole package of things that are now coming into play that just make it easy. So if we can go be the person who takes a 17-year-old girl from Norway, and that'll be fine. I think that's basically it. That the reason that things have worked out here so well is because I have been really careful about matching the kid to school and, the kid to school and the family. And, and that to me, is a lot of the reason that we've had a lot of success here. That's about all. And then let me see if I had any more.
You have about 15 seconds.
Okay. Wonderful 15-year-old kid who won a scholarship from Jordan out of 500 kids, and he was the 15-year-old and won out of 500 people. So that's my 15-year-old plug. Done.
Thank you. I think we did cover most of the issues because we did have the opportunity to see a PowerPoint ahead of time. I think that all the issues that we came up, we're looking at, so what we'll do is we'll look at the other policies of our surrounding districts and have an idea how other people are dealing with this, because obviously we're not alone with the English language learners. However, we are alone we do have a lower amount of diversity here, which we all are very aware of. All right, so what we're going to do then, we will take the policy off of the agenda. We will bring the policy and a new AR back to the May 29th meeting.
I don't think it's foreign language.
Foreign
I think it's foreign exchange students.
Yes.
The comment
In the-
about Ms. Hahn's. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, make it more accurate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that is, we will see 239. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Minor. Okay, where are we still in review?
We're still in a review, so we can look at 610. Do you want to look at 610?
Yeah, was Brenda here?
Yeah,
Do you want to
or
look
is
at
there
it?
something else you would?
Something that might be quicker would be the property one.
Okay, great, so we will look at 708,
708?
use of district property.
My understanding was that at the last meeting, the final portion of the policy, there was a question whether this section, titled Revenues from District Property, was required. It's certainly not required, so if the will of the committee is to remove that, we can certainly do that.
Can we scroll up to that version
It's at the bottom.
or down?
There you go, right there.
Revenues from
District property.
Okay.
I guess my comment,
Yeah.
Sarah's, yeah, it's, okay. With Sue Lilhofer, we go through a process and we have a very detailed,
Right.
revenue, probably more so than most of our colleagues, although not entirely, some of our surrounding districts have that. We don't really reference, and I can't right off the top of my head, I was trying to look earlier as to what policy and what administrative reg that related to. But we certainly do look at the cost and the classifications continually.
And we're checking here to see whether it's policy 707, which is what's cross-referenced.
Down below, yes.
I'm fairly certain that's the case. So 707 is access to district facilities, and that's where your classifications are probably spelled out.
And the dollars.
Fee schedule.
Right,
Correct.
there's a fee schedule, I know that there's all of that.
That's what 707 is.
Everyone's eyes glaze over.
I remember this one.
Yes, I'm sure you will, once you look at it.
So,
So, I don't know.
Ed, what was the question was, do we need that entire section?
There was a question from the committee at last meeting whether that whole section of revenues from district property can come out. And it's probably adequately addressed by 707.
And the paragraph there, each proposed use shall be evaluated by the administration and submitted to the board for consideration and approval. I'm not sure use.
That doesn't make sense, yeah.
I think that was one of the questions that we had, was it being followed as it was written? Right? Clearly it wasn't.
Right. And
If we don't need it,
I don't see why we do this.
Yeah, it can come out.
Yeah, take
The
that.
whole section,
Yes.
yes.
I have another comment about the new paragraph above here. I think it's at the end of the first section where the green stuff.
Neither district.
This is the, yeah.
So, I'm not clear about, so if an item is locked in so it says, prohibits locked items of a personal nature from being stored. Is an item locked if it's in a locked classroom? Is that what that means?
No, there's some background here. It came to the attention of administrators that someone had a lockbox
Yeah.
in there stored on our district property, and there was some concern about what might be in that box. And so we would just like to,
So a locked item in this case, locked really means to modify items. But if somebody locks their bike in a stairwell,
that's not what this is. This is about
Okay.
someone storing personal items on district property.
but if I lock my bike.
Well, you're
for
gonna
the
take your
winter-
bike with you, right? You're not.
No, it's the winter time, and I need to store it somewhere, and nothing's in that stairwell at the end of the annex anyway, where there's lots of
There would
old
be,
stuff
there would be,
you know.
We're not a repository for
you know,
personal.
we're not a
Right.
repository for personal property.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the board prohibits.
So, like,
Do we need
the
that
way
line?
it's written,
Yeah.
it seems to me, if I'm the superintendent and I have a photo of my family in my locked office, that seems to be prohibited by this language. And I'm sure that's not the intent.
It's
But
not,
but I think that's what it says,
Right, I think the second,
or it certainly can be read that way.
We've also had other instances where things have been locked and we wanted to open them, cut the locks. And there was questions about whether we should do that or not. And it's not only, I know this particular is addressing employees, but students can fall into that at the end of the year as well.
So if the purpose is to prohibit storage of items that the administration, if the idea is that the administration should have access to any item, any personal item stored in the district,
yeah, that's a question of access.
that seems like
storage of
maybe what it
personal
should
property.
say.
I mean, I would argue that by placing your bike outside of the school for the day, you're not necessarily storing it there.
No, but I think.
If you store it for the winter,
If you store it for the winter.
then,
That's not appropriate. That should
Yeah,
be
and we wouldn't want
absolutely-
somebody doing that, I presume.
right,
no,
absolutely,
clearly
right,
not.
that's.
And that, I think, that's still a little bit different than the stored item where we can't see what's in
Yeah, I
there.
think that problem is that we don't know what's in a
Yeah.
lockbox, and that's concerning.
So I think if something, I think if we want to say, if something is stored on district property or even on district property,
Subject to
it's subject to
To
search.
search.
I mean, I think that's already true, of student backpacks, for example, right?
But we're talking about employees.
But, talking about employees, so it'd be an extension of a policy that's already applied to students.
Yeah, so there's all
But
sorts
that's
of
not,
issues.
it doesn't
that-
feel
yeah.
like how this is written. That's the goal.
Right, no, I'm glad to know the background, because I didn't know the background, and I
Yeah.
didn't know what we were trying to address with this, so that's very helpful in figuring out how to handle that.
Sounds like subject to
Now we
search.
redo it, so it makes sense.
If we want language that says stuff is subject to search, I think that's what it should say.
Well, it's more than that, we don't want them to store it.
Well, there's that, the first sentence.
It's prohibiting them from being here, but if you do, we
We're gonna,
presume.
we have the right to store, right?
Well, the right to store, so you have to balance
They're two
the right to
different-
store the bike for the winter in the stairwell against
That wasn't prohibited.
the picture of the photo of your family on the desk. I mean, that, clearly that latter one should be okay. But there's, coming up with language that differentiates those is probably hard.
No one feels threatened by a picture on a desk.
Are they talking about
Or
things
like-
specifically in a locked, like if I brought a file box with a lock on it?
Right,
My own person, yeah, that is
That's
what
your
they're
call.
talking about.
right,
They're not
exactly.
talking about stuff on my desk. I
Right,
didn't-
so that's what we just need to be very clear, so if
Yeah.
someone reading this knows what we're telling
Right.
them they can and cannot do. And then if they do it, they're in violation of
Who
policy.
wrote this language? Was that Ken?
I think it was a combination of just discussion
And I think we
internally.
go back
We
and.
can recraft this.
Yeah, that's what I think we just need to
Yeah,
recraft.
if someone we-
The first sentence I think is fine, it's just the
Ken's
second
familiar
sentence.
with the situation that last.
Sure, sure.
Right,
No, but there's also the fact that somebody may bring in a couch and use it in the classroom.
that happens all the time.
And that would say I can't
Well,
bring it in.
Well, that's the thing,
Unless
the
you-
idea of a repository for personal property, are you using it
well,
for
that-
storing the
that
couch?
wouldn't be a bad
Should
idea.
they be bringing in with all the allergies and?
No, yeah, we do want to prohibit, I think we actually do want to prohibit.
And then when they get tired of it, we have
Sorry.
to pull it away.
When one person does it, it's an interesting personality quirk. When it becomes a general process, it's a problem.
Or you have flood, you have water that comes
And damages.
and damages.
And what happens to
So
it?
then
Or you have children with allergies.
Or it's an elementary school.
So that's a
problem with
totally
lights.
different.
All of which.
So as this language is redrafted, what are the goals? What
Yeah.
are we-
So I heard 3 goals.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll try to speak all, see if
I
you
know.
agree. One is the stuff that you bring in is subject to search. One is that it's not intended to be a repository for, so the first sentence sort of gets at it, but there's
Okay.
a danger in overreading that.
Materials that are not used in your instructional program.
Yeah.
So you're not going to store your bike in our hallway, in our stairway,
Yeah,
because that's not used instructionally.
right. But we still want to allow the photo on the desk.
I think that, yeah, with that,
And
We
we don't
can
want
just maybe
anything,
look the other way from the photo on the desk and not try to codify
a
that.
photo on the desk is not hidden from anyone. A photo on the desk is out there, and I see it when I walk in a room.
so there's something that we need to have about, yeah.
The title of the
It maybe not long,
policy
it's
is
something
use
that's.
of district.
The actual
property.
item
The
is
title.
You
Right.
can't
I'm not
really see.
suspicious.
Right, like I'm bringing a safe with my
You
diamond.
can't bring a safe for, I mean, the only
Diamonds.
time we lock boxes, so it'd be permissible, would be like the PTA's lockbox for the money that they're having for like bingo night, you
It
know,
should
it's like,
be in the vault
that's a-
in the office.
right, and that's something, right, it should be stored, that makes sense. It's a matter of, we don't want things that are,
Is this conversation more appropriate someplace else? I'm looking at the title of the policy, use of district property.
We had a discussion at the
employees.
And I wasn't in the last one,
to
so
figure out where to put it.
perhaps it's inappropriate that I make the comment since I wasn't.
Maybe another conversation with Ken, who again knows the background of this, to get some, because we don't want to prohibit the photo on the desk. We do want to prohibit long-term storage of personal items that have nothing to do with the instructional program.
Or work environment, you know, or whatever, yeah.
Right, and then there's
Yeah.
the idea of the couch, which I don't think was anywhere in anybody's mind when we went here.
Right, so that's something that, yeah, that's a third thing we want to talk about.
There's also nothing in this policy that is requiring the district to prosecute, so to speak. It's more language that if a problem arises, you have this to fall back on.
Right.
Which was our purpose.
Correct.
Okay.
So did that answer your question about what it is we're looking for when we retract it?
Partially.
We know.
Well, we're talking about searches pretty soon here,
We'll get
Vinny.
closer. Go on.
That's funny. We are talking about searches, but that's pupils, so that's part of this. All right, so we're bringing back 708 at the next.
Maybe you just go under research.
Yeah.
Maybe
But
it
that's-
does go under research.
That's what I'm thinking, so
I
searches.
think it's only under students.
Yeah, but we can add searches. I think we create a policy for this. I think that makes more sense if that's what we are trying to. I mean, I think we put that in, because 708 district use of property, that doesn't, is the repository language appropriate in there anyway? I
Well, you're using the property as a garage.
don't know. Sure. Okay, well, we can throw that first sentence in there, and maybe we can
Well,
I'm
create.
wondering, is it covered under any of the employee
That's
regulations?
why I don't see it. That's why I just was looking
You
at that.
would
I
think
don't
for the
see it.
same reason that somewhere in our employee regulations, there's some,
Some language
Form
in
of
there. I don't see it. That's why I just looked too, and I was like, I don't see it in
It
here.
should be somewhere. I mean, you'd expect there to be some
I know.
policy that says, don't store your bike for the winter on the building, but
Just the handbook,
Skis.
maybe? I know.
probably not for the winter, but, you know.
That would be the opposite.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah, just switch it up.
we have an employee handbook, right, somewhere along the line? I would think that, assuming we have one. I don't know, we can write this in the next teacher's contract too. I think that's another thing we can add it right in there. So,
Well,
The couch is.
not all these teachers.
Yeah.
well, no,
The
that's
couch
very
is
true.
the rest of them.
That's very true. Okay, yeah, the
I
couch.
try to put the couches in the contract and you'll never solve.
All right, so 7/8's coming back, 7/08's coming back, and maybe we will, just put it in the searches policy, I don't know. But then there's a whole other area of case law.
We'll revisit.
Yeah.
To the committee.
Okay, good. All right, so 610, go back to that one.
610 purchase, do you want to do 610?
Do you want to do that, or do you want to,
I'm concerned about the time.
only like 10 minutes here.
Is,
Okay, so just use these other ones instead.
So we're gonna move this to May 29th?
Yeah.
HIV, is that pretty short?
I think so.
Discuss.
I think, isn't that just for
Sure,
repeal?
yeah, we can.
Is it 203 for repeal, 303.1 for repeal?
We changed that.
Oh, you did.
Sorry, I didn't.
So there
Oh,
is,
it's okay.
there is new language, folks, like say.
It was.
All right, never mind.
So there are revisions, the revisions are minor to 203.
Okay, let's do 203.1.
That-
HIP. No,
Oh,
I'm sorry, no, 203, I'm sorry, not 203.
Oh, 203, yeah.
Right. Now, the last conversation, I knew we were gonna throw it in 203, so it's fine.
The only additional language here is from the guidance from PE.
Okay.
Yeah, looks okay to me.
Well, they're gonna want that for chiropractic.
So waivers are applicable to students who are homeless or in foster care. We don't have that or in foster care in any of the other places where we have homeless, I don't think. Should we? Is that specific to this case, or is that?
Specific to immunization requirements.
Okay.
Correct.
Right, because homeless and foster care are very different.
Yeah, I just noted that it seemed different than all the other ways we do homeless.
In this case, both situations, they may not have records.
All right. So policy 203 has those changes, base of PDs.
I have another question.
Go for it.
Sorry. Under guidelines, the new paragraph in the middle, it says, medical exemption to immunization shall expire in the event that the child's physician determines that immunizations are no longer detrimental to the health of the child. We need paperwork on that, and should it say so? So the physician determines that they're no longer detrimental, we need a letter from the physician saying, hey, I revoked the previous thing that I wrote that said,
Every year, they have to do
Oh, they have
a
to-
history update.
so basically,
So
they wouldn't
if
give
your
us
doc-
another letter.
Right, if their doc doesn't sign off that year, then they no longer have that.
Or sometimes a certificate could say, this immunization is not appropriate for at least 3 more months. The child will be ready for this in 3 months. At the end of the 3 months, that exemption would expire. We would expect that the student be getting immunized unless a different exemption were applicable.
And our nurses will track all of that.
Correct.
So I feel like the trigger as written is that the physician determined that it's no longer detrimental. It feels like the actual trigger, as you two just described it, was that we no longer have paperwork that determines that an immunization would be detrimental.
It could be either. It could come about either way. So, and let me look at it up here.
It's right at the top of the page.
School code.
So, I guess in this case, every year, Dr. Wheeler, say that again, every year, the student would have to submit a new,
Health form,
okay,
and if they had to have the medical exemption, they would get the form from their doctor. If their doctor no longer signed off on it, then we wouldn't have that documentation.
So it seems like maybe at the end of this, there should be an or previous, whatever the document, name of the document is, previous documents have, have expired, or maybe we want to explicitly say the documents from previous academic years. I mean, that's just a general case. But documents from
It does appear that this is lifted directly
Right
from
out.
code, right?
Yeah, if you hit that as a
If I
link,
see when I highlight over
if you
it.
hit, and then it'll
Yeah.
take right to the code, and you can, it's almost verbatim.
So let's see.
Well, I think the ambiguous as code
It
often
is.
is, but
And then I-
if that's what code says, as I always say when that happens.
We
that's what the
defer
code
to
says, That's what the code says. So even if it's
Regardless
terrible,
if it makes
terribly
sense.
written, it's still code.
So we become potentially the
On the
have these
web-
conversations.
on the
You have to follow
website,
code
the
of
immunization
the-
requirements are there,
Mm.
and it has all the information
Okay.
and what's necessary. I mean, sometimes a lot of students will come with no immunizations at all, and you can't get them all at one time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
So that's why, you know, you have to have them
right, that makes,
parse out and data scheduling and to show evidence of their appointments.
okay.
So, yeah, I mean, in this case, if the legislature neglected to ask us first and they went and asked.
They don't ask the PD.
Well, we can ask anyway.
I don't know why they didn't ask us first, but, if that's what it says, that's what it says, so,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, so that's 203. Are we good? So we can do first reading on 203? And likewise, I would like to do 203.1 really fast too, so we can get those both done
I don't know
together.
that we can do 203.1 fast because there's a lot in there.
Second.
Yeah, 203 is good for first reading.
That's a first.
It's just cutting a lot of things. Throwing in.
That's the thing.
Now, 203.1, isn't this based on
It's the,
PDE too?
yes, it's the HIV Confidentiality Act.
Right.
And then also guidance from PE.
It's not like we have a lot of choice in any of this either. This is
Correct.
verbatim from.
This was actually a policy where the PSBA template actually did a pretty good job here. Because it is so, there's not a lot of work.
There's no flexibility.
Well, then that makes it easy for us.
And that's where most of this language
Congratulations.
Right, there's not a way that we can massage anything.
Most of your questions are probably, again, because of
That's provided.
And this is 15 years old, so I'm sure there have been
Gosh, I hope.
updates.
Oh, yeah.
correct.
So this is provided.
Well, let's do first reading and.
Right, if there's first reading, if there's anything that you see that like we can say, hey,
Yeah.
we have an actual option here.
Well, actually, we got a lot to.
Yeah, so we didn't get to
Search.
610 and we didn't get to 226. You know, I thought that we had a fairly light schedule, but there was things we talked about. All right, so that wasn't too bad. We have no other members here or community members here for community input. I can go through the things real fast so we know where we are. From the first section of the second reading adoption, we are looking for second reading adoption as well as approval on 207, 234, 251, and 254. We are bringing, 323 is going for a first, it's going for a first reading because we are changing the definitions and authority sections in there. And then we have, for first reading,
So it was P 423 and P 523. Sorry, you said,
thank you,
fine.
for the record, thank you. So the tobacco and smoking related products, those three policies, those are coming for first reading. Likewise, coming for first reading is 203 and 203.1, those policies, as well as policy 808. And so what we're going to see on the next policy committee meeting on May 29th, we will see 239, 610, 203, or no, sorry, my brain's not working, 239, 610, 226, policy and AR for searches, and then the AR for 808.
As well as 708.
708.
All the other ARs for the policies that are going for second reading and adoption are also going to the legislative meeting as well.
Yes, everything, yeah, policies for the whole first section.
You didn't say that for this one.
I didn't say policy, I just said second reading approval and adoption for 207. I was thinking about that. All right, so beyond that,
Sorry, I questioned
all right. All right, so we have the regular policy meeting May 29th. We have a special policy meeting May 3rd after school That one will be at the Upper Dublin High School Forum Room. We have met previously with members of the SGA. We're going to cover specific SGA policies. So if everyone can come to that, that's great. If you can't, we know that's a special meeting right after school on May 3rd, so.
Okay, I've heard back from 2 districts
Adjourn.
already.